Hello, BookTube. Yesterday, on Comic Book Wednesday, Michael K. Kang the Conqueror Vaughan held up an epic collection from Marvel Comics and talked about it a bit. Children of the Atom. You may have seen his video. I'll leave a link to it down below if you didn't, because your day isn't complete without a visit to stately Vaughan Manor. And the epic collections are reprint collections that Marvel started years ago that have been very popular. They, instead of many of the reprint collections that Marvel has done in the past that have either been cheap but in black and white, or in color but very expensive, the Marvel Masterworks line, they come out in hardcover for almost $100 for every volume. Instead, the epic collections are bigger. First of all, you get more content. They're in color on nice, slick paper, and the price is a bit high, around $40, but you get a huge swath of issues. The epic collection that Michael's talking about is almost almost a third of the original run of the X-Men, just issue after issue after issue, usually with lots of really good ancillary material, and usually with any kind of spin-off issue from some other title brought in and slotted in right into the right place in the continuity. In other words, care and effort goes into them. They're actually worth the price. Michael has a huge shelf of epic collections. I used to. I don't anymore, but I still do have a great number of epic collections, and I'm always looking. In every new book month, I'm always looking for what new epic collections are coming out. Marvel, I don't have any publishing contacts at Marvel, so I can't ask for these things, and I'm not sure that I would anyway. For $40 reprint volumes. I don't, one way or another, I don't have current contacts for Marvel or DC Comics. So I just look at the epic collections in order to convince myself to buy them, or to convince myself not to. For instance, the epic collections will reprint, they aren't going strictly chronological the way the Marvel Masterworks volumes are. They aren't just marching ahead where you can predict. Instead, they take a chunk here and a chunk there from different runs on different titles, which means that a significant chunk of any $40 epic collection can be bad, can be the kind of issues that you maybe got because you never missed an issue of the comic when it was coming out on the newsstands, but that you wouldn't want to pay $40 for, that you wouldn't want to have, commemorized on your shelves. That just recently happened to me with an epic collection of Thor from Marvel Comics. The first half of which includes a really good storyline with artwork by Ron Frenz, who's criminally underrated, in which we get a new Thor, in which an ordinary guy named Eric Masterson takes on the mantle and the power of Thor briefly. That run is really good. And part of that run is in that epic collection that's just new. It's brand new. It came out last week. But when I was cross-indexing the individual issues that are in the volume against what their covers, so that I could immediately recognize what they were, I realized that half the issues in that volume were ones that aren't connected with that run and that I wouldn't want. I would never reread them. I didn't like them when I got them the first time. And that was true years ago with a couple of epic collections of the Avengers. There was a really great run on the Avengers that I've praised a couple of times on this channel. An odd 90s style team. They were wearing matching jackets. For some reason they had headpieces, tech, that sort of thing. The team, though, was really good. The balance on the team was really good. I'm blanking for the minute on who the writer was, because I don't care who writers are. Michael will know who the writer was of the great run with Steve Epting artwork. Steve Epting did the pencils for the main stories in that run of a team that was led by the Black Widow, and that included the Black Knight, Dane Whitman. I'm amazed if Marvel doesn't throw more light on that run in light of the fact that they're trying to foist a Black Knight on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But it was a great development of the character into some sort of scruffy bad boy, dark figure. Captain America came in and out. The Vision, Crystal from the Inhumans, who has been a member of the Fantastic Four and is a member of the Inhuman royal family, came to Avengers Mansion and became a member of the team. And Hercules was a member of this team for the whole of its run. And an odd realization of Hercules, of course, because Marvel has been screwing around with Hercules' power levels for the last 30 years. saying, well, he's been banished to Earth, he's mostly human, he's really strong, but he's not godlike strong anymore. The Hercules that we first meet for real in Journey into Mystery with Thor, the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby Hercules, who actually, it's a long team up with Thor that transitions Journey into Mystery into being the Mighty Thor magazine. That Hercules, who's every bit as strong and powerful as Thor, so in other words, a match for the Hulk on any day, that Hercules, the one that joins the Avengers years and years ago, some of my favorite issues back then, I couldn't get enough of it. Back when the Avengers was a very low-powered team. It was Captain America, the Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and Hawkeye. That team was joined by Hercules, who was on Earth and looking for adventure and was more powerful than all of them put together many times over. And I remember when it looked like Stan Lee was actually going to do that, I suddenly couldn't get to the newsstand fast enough to get those issues. That Hercules has largely not been a part of Marvel Comics. Hercules has been, for instance, a staple member of the relaunched Avengers that is currently going on, but on some watered down level. It's some watered down level. For most of his time in the Avengers after that first run, he has been just a watered down strong guy. So he's not completely invulnerable. He's not prohibitively strong. It's not like the fight is over if he shows up, that sort of thing. But he was a part of that Steve Epting team. I say Steve Epting because I'm blanking on who wrote the issues. But it was well done. There was a good deal of drama, mostly centering around another character that I would think Marvel would want to reprint these issues to show, and that is Circe of the Eternals. A very bland Jack Kirby creation of a superpowered hidden race of beings who have any superpower that you want, and they're disastrously, Marvel wants to introduce them into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That is ridiculous. They present so much more of a dramatic problem than, for instance, the Asgardians of Thor's homeworld. Because the Asgardians of Thor's homeworld can each lift 40 tons. They are largely invulnerable to conventional harm. They have thousands of years of combat experience. Many of them are quasi-magical in nature. So if they were roaming around Earth, they would render superheroes completely pointless, right? Among other things. That's what they would do. If you were Captain America and you were worried about advances that Hydra was making in South America, you wouldn't take the Avengers, consisting of a normal Russian spy with compressed air bracelets, or some carnival stumblebum who's good with a bow and arrow. You wouldn't even take Iron Man, who can be hacked. Instead, you would take 40 Asgardians, and there wouldn't be anything that you couldn't do. And Stan Lee knew that early on, and largely had Asgardians content to stay in their own realm, in the realm eternal in Asgard, and not go lollygagging around on Earth. There are only two exceptions, Thor and Valkyrie. And even there, Marvel writers forever and ever found ways to limit the power of Valkyrie, of the character of Valkyrie, by making her mentally impaired, or placing her in an enchantment that allowed her not to lift a pinky against women, or whatever, not knowing her own past, not having her full power level. One way or another, the Eternals blows that apart, because the Eternals are adventurous, and they aren't noticeably xenophobic. So, and they're superpower. Every one of them has superpowers that would make them the most powerful person on any team. I don't know what that's going to do to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It played hob with the Marvel comic book universe, because all of a sudden you've got these blandly superpowered characters who've been around for thousands of years and can do anything. But the writer of this run of the Avengers made it work by creating a very tempestuous love affair between Circe and Black Knight, two characters that Marvel is going to want to push in the new cinematic universe. So you would think that the Marvel epic adventures of that Avengers run I would have gobbled up. But in both cases, there were 2 volumes, and in both cases, half the stuff that was in the issue was stuff I wouldn't want. And I just couldn't justify the expense for the volumes in that case. But for today, I watched Michael K. Vaughan talk about Children of the Atom, the Epic Collection, and then we shirtless Skyped, as we often do, and decided on an ongoing event. And you might say, well, gee, he didn't mention that on his own channel. It almost seems like he doesn't even know about it. Perhaps the Queen is in town. I assure you, would I foist an event on a fellow booktuber without them knowing it? Does that seem likely? We decided, a bit of shirtless Skyping, that we would do a regular event. Comic Book Wednesdays, the world's finest Comic Book Wednesdays, where the forces of stately Vaughan Manor and not-so-stately Hyde Cottage team up every Wednesday. I realize it's not Wednesday, but I'm readjusting. I'm reacclimating to Hyde Cottage. I've been gone for 2 weeks. So every Wednesday, we're going to talk about an epic collection and just ramble about comics. And since he talked about Children of the Atom, I was wondering what form this should take. He and I will have to consult further on that subject. Should it be that we each talk about the same epic collection? He has a lot more than I do, and he probably his likes and dislikes fall on a different spectrum than I do. I have often said that with just a tiny bit more daring on the part of Stan Lee, the original X-Men team would have been a lot more interesting, I think. Ordinarily, Stan Lee didn't lack for daring, but what was missing in that original team, I hate to say it, but it's true in the comic book superhero world, was power. There was scarcely an enemy that they fought that they could possibly beat. Half their members were portrayed as useless. And Stan Lee gave them some very, very powerful villains, mainly two. Magneto, the very first villain that they meet, a full-grown man who has complete control over magnets, over metal, and also a little later on, the Juggernaut, a being of Hulk-level strength and invulnerability. And then Stan Lee, he liked to do this anyway in comics, where he would come up with a superhero team, he'd put them through their paces, and then he would put them up against villains that they just couldn't beat, and then somehow make them beat them. It was absolutely thrilling. The marquee example of that, of course, was when he said in a story conference about the then relatively new Fantastic Four, what if they fought God? And that turned out to be Galactus. I've often thought that not only could that original team have benefited from a slight power uppage, I don't know that I agree that Jean Grey should suddenly have had mental powers. Telekinesis is strong enough, but what if her telekinesis were really strong? Right? Picture the great animated Star Wars, the Star Wars cartoon. Picture what Mace Windu could do with his telekinesis. It's pretty extensive. I'm not saying I'll bump her up to that level, but it could have been a little bit more than lifting pencils off tables. And what if the members of the team were Marvel Girl? They were teenagers, first of all, and maybe their training could have been a little more rigorous, so they could have been a little more effective in the field. But Marvel Girl had low-level telekinesis and low-level mind reading. And then there was Warren Worthington III, the Angel, a teenage boy with big white wings growing out of his shoulders that allowed him to fly. Not much you can do there, but even then, he was hardly ever used effectively. In most fight scenes, then and in decades later, he just sort of flies around. And later got a power upgrade, but only by being desecrated by a villain, only by being changed into a character called Archangel. There was no reason, there was no good reason to power upgrade that original Angel, except along his original lines. Just make him a lot faster. Make him a lot tougher. Make those wings really powerful. They would have to be for him to fly anyway. Any of you ornithologists out in the field will know, if a big bird, a bald eagle, or some sort of fishing eagle, if they hit you with one of their wings, you're really going to feel it. They can break your arm. And that was never really, even that level of power was never really given to Angel, nor was it ever thought out. Stan Lee never really thought out what kind of effective combat measures a person like Angel, someone who can fly really fast, would develop against grounded beings. Stan Lee never really worked that out. And almost never has Warren Worthington III, the Angel, employ any such tactics. If he had reinforced boots, for instance, he could ram people from the sky. He almost never grabs the harnesses of any miscellaneous villains and simply flies them up into the air. He has a deadly advantage then, and if they can't fly, and almost never uses it. Instead, he flies around, he gets netted, he gets captured. Then another member was Bobby Drake, the Iceman, who was originally shown as just a goofy teenager, the youngest of the team, who can cover himself in snow. Eventually, it turns out he can cover himself in ice and also project ice. Think about that for a minute. We're told in an early X-Men adventure that his power is moisture in the air. That's the source of his power, which means it doesn't have to be cold for him to use his power. Imagine if you could generate blocks of ice and hurl them at speed at other people. Ice is as strong as concrete and sharper than steel. It's a tremendously formidable power that is never made formidable. Iceman encases people entirely from head to toe in ice, and they sort of struggle and break free when really they would black out. And the cold alone. Also, how many times, think of the combination of how powerful it would be as a combination. If the X-Men were facing a gigantic team of supervillains, think how powerful a combination it would be if Iceman iced the ground so that no one has their sense of balance. No one can walk on ice unless you've been trained to do it. And at the same time that he was doing that, Marvel Girl was knocking people off their pins and needles with telekinesis while the angel picks at them from the sky. That would be almost unbeatable. That's never done. As far as I remember, in the early adventures in the volume that Michael K. Vaughan was showing, Iceman never ices the ground under Juggernaut's feet. That would incapacitate him almost completely, and he never does it. And then the other members are the Beast, Hank McCoy, who's the smartest member of the team, and paradoxically, the paradox that Stan Lee loved, looks like a gorilla. So he's got, his legs are as big and his arms are as long and as big as his legs, and he's sort of squat. And we're told that he's kind of tough. His code name is the Beast, but Stan Lee refuses to give him super strength. That Beast on the original team could maybe lift about a ton. What if he could lift 10 tons? That's not much. That's less than Spider-Man. But it at least puts him on the map. It allows him to punch somebody and have them feel it. And Stan Lee didn't do that. Again, the character had to undergo many, many weird, cosmetic, ad hoc updates over the decades in order to reach any kind of a power level like that, when that shouldn't have been true. Should have been true from the very beginning. That would have made the Beast more formidable. And then there's the leader of the team, Scott Summers, Cyclops, whose mutant ability is that beams of shattering force are constantly flying out of his eyes when they're open. His eyelids stop the force if he keeps them closed. And also a substance called ruby quartz also contains them. And he has ruby quartz glasses, a visor, to keep his eye beams in check. The original X-Men were perfect, except for Marvel Girl. Stan Lee was chivalrous to a fault. But other than that, the original X-Men are a perfect example of what Stan Lee considered the mutations in his Marvel Universe to be like, which is that there are pluses and minuses. That you, at least for the X-Men team, you don't get your powers scot-free. There are drawbacks. It's pretty hard to fit in socially as a teenager if you've got huge wings growing out of your shoulder blades. Scott Summers is a perfect example. Can't ever look at anyone with his open eyes without blasting them to atoms. But also Hank McCoy is physically disfigured. That sort of thing, that tends to be the rule. Marvel X mutants have gone completely away from that. They all look like Hollywood stars, and they don't suffer anything like that. They all just have their superpowers and are still beautiful. Still able to hide their superpowers is what I'm trying to say. With only a few exceptions. Like, for instance, think of the new X-Men, the new improved, the all-new, all-different X-Men. Nightcrawler is a perfect example of a Stan Lee kind of mutant, where he has enhanced abilities, but he can no longer fit in society. But look how rare he is in the all-new, all-different X-Men Colossus when he's not in armor form. Is just a big guy. Aurora, Storm is beautiful. Thunderbird looks exactly like a normal human. He's just an enhanced normal human. That sort of thing is the rule now rather than the exception. I thought maybe we could talk about we'd talk about the same epic collection for World's Finest Comic Book Wednesday. But then I thought, nah, we'll spread the fun. So we'll talk about different epic collections. And I want to show you one today. I've shown it to you before. I will try not to go on at great length about it. But the reason that I want to show you this is because I was thinking about this. Now, the Children of the Atom, the one that Michael K. Vaughan held up, is an epic collection that doesn't conform to the flaws that I was just talking about 300 years ago. I was talking about the flaw in that an epic collection will sometimes net you junk in addition to gems. That volume, Children of the Atom, doesn't have any junk in it. So, you're getting your money's worth, I guess, is what I'm saying. And this is another one that doesn't have any junk in it. This is the Avengers Defenders War. This is an Avengers epic collection. See, that is, for those of you who don't know, that's what we're talking about in this comic book collaboration that we totally planned. We're talking about, that's the epic collection. The big, thick thing. The price on this is $40. Yeah, $40. But you get a lot. You get many, many issues. And this is a volume that has as its headliner the Avengers Defenders War. For some odd reason, that is not on the cover. Go figure. I don't understand these things at all. It's a very beautiful John Romita cover, but it's does nothing to do with you. That's the Collector. Some of you remember from is it Guardians of the Galaxy, the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Benicio del Toro. I don't know why this isn't an Avengers Defenders cover, but one way or another, the marquee attraction of the cover of the volume is the Avengers Defenders clash. The Avengers was a big team in the 70s. It was being written by Steve Englehart, who's really good. He's not, I don't think, completely cut out to write comic books, but really, really good, really smart, very adult. And at the time that we're talking about for the team was fairly big. It was Thor, Iron Man, and Captain America, the Holy Trinity. It was the Vision, the Scarlet Witch, the Swordsman, Mantis, Black Panther, and, you know, Hawkeye could show up. There could be other people as well, but it was a nice, big, healthy team. And at the same time, Marvel had another super team that it doesn't have anymore, the Defenders, that sort of came together ad hoc in a couple of issues of the Submariner and then got its own feature. And the Defenders was a non-team. There were no regular meetings, there was no charter, there were no membership cards, there was no nothing like that. People came and went to Doctor Strange's mansion on Bleecker Street. And there was no expectation of membership at all. There was no current roster. And the team was prohibitively powerful, to the extent that I wondered, I watched the whole procedure. I loved the Submariner issues where the original core of the team assembled. And I loved the original issues of the Defenders. But I kept wondering, how can you make this work? What can you possibly make dramatically interesting about a team that's so overpowered? You know, the core of it is Doctor Strange, who can do pretty much anything, right? He's the Sorcerer Supreme. He has one of the most powerful characters in the Marvel Universe, but also the Silver Surfer, who is, again, one of the most powerful characters in the Marvel Universe, and the Hulk. The Hulk was one of the founding members of the Defenders, also one of the founding members of the Avengers, but the Defenders, he seemed to work a little better. And what do you do if the core of your team is Doctor Strange, the Silver Surfer, and the Hulk? You would think that would mean you would haul in a lot of weaker members in order to up the drama, and that's what the Avengers did once upon a time. And the Defenders did do that. They brought in Valkyrie, who is an Asgardian, but not a superpowered Asgardian like Thor. So she has lots of weaknesses, but she has lots of strength as well. Hawkeye was often a member of the Defenders. They brought in the Submariner, which doesn't really help with the depowering. And these characters would show up just at random intervals. There was also, for a long time in the Defenders, although not in these issues, there was a character called Nighthawk that some writers, Steve Englehart mainly, managed to make fairly interesting. But at one point, Englehart wanted to do a team-up between the two teams. And in the classic Marvel tradition, before the heroes team up, they fight. There's always a misunderstanding that causes them to fight. And the powers that be at Marvel, Steve Englehart, realized that if you're going to have two of this kind of teams fight, the fights are going to have to go on for a long time. They can't be short. And so that's what happened. So the whole year, the whole summer of the Avengers Defenders was crossing between Avengers and Defenders comic books. You couldn't get the whole story unless you bought both titles, which is, you know, you might shrug your shoulders now at that because it's absolutely commonplace, but it wasn't commonplace at the time that this happened. It was bizarre to think that this issue of the Avengers that you're reading is going to be continued in an issue of the Defenders was a new idea and fascinating. And Englehart decided that the Avengers and Defenders would split up into little groups and fight issue by issue. And that's what is collected in the first half of this volume. You have Mantis and the Black Panther, basically two acrobats, fighting Doctor Strange. It's absolutely no contest. You have Captain America fighting the Submariner. At a time before the continuity had established that Captain America and the Submariner remembered fighting alongside each other in World War II. So it's kind of weird to see. Again, it should be no contest. At the time that these issues came out, briefly in Captain America's own comic book, he had a degree of super strength. He wasn't just the pinnacle of human perfection. He had more strength than that. He could lift tons. But nowhere near as strong as Prince Namor, the Submariner, and Namor points that out in their fight, that you might have a limited degree of super strength, but my strength is unlimited. They fight. The Silver Surfer fights the Scarlet Witch and the Vision. Although that issue had a fantastic John Romita cover, I wonder if I can quickly find it for you. It also had a terrific tagline on the cover: "Where strikes the Silver Surfer, there falls an enemy to his doom." This is just to show the spirit of Stan Lee wasn't dead. I wonder if I'll be able to... Oh, no. Oh, yes. There we go. Look at that. Look at that. Where strikes the Silver Surfer, there falls an enemy to his doom. Look at that. That is just beautiful. Of course, the Vision and the Scarlet Witch do what they can, but they can't beat the Silver Surfer. And the Swordsman, a great character in Englehart's run, just fantastic. Just a guy who's really good with a sword, goes up against Valkyrie from the Defenders, who's also really good with a sword. Obviously, she's been using one for thousands of years, only she is much, much stronger. He's a normal guy. She can lift 40 tons. And she tells him that. She says, "You may be unmatched with a sword, but I'm much more powerful than you are." But the whole time that those issues were going out, and you were getting these great fights as the Avengers and Defenders continue to misunderstand each other, there is a bad guy here. It's Dormammu. And he is in league with Loki, Thor's half-brother. And there's a MacGuffin, a gigantic cosmic MacGuffin. There's always a MacGuffin. And we know what eventually the story is going to be, that the Avengers and Defenders are going to get together in order to fight Dormammu and rescue, redirect, destroy that MacGuffin. But first they all have to fight each other. And as the issues are coming forward, Hawkeye versus Iron Man, the Scarlet Witch and the Vision versus the Silver Surfer, Swordsman versus Valkyrie, the whole time that was happening, all Marvel fans in the country were saying, "Okay, but we know what fight we're waiting for, and you're intentionally leaving it for the last." And it was true. Englehart did leave it for the last, and it's terrific. And of course, if you know anything about your comic book rosters, you will know who I'm talking about. Thor versus the Hulk. Defenders number 10. Thor versus the Hulk. The fight to end all fights. This had happened a few times before in Marvel continuity, where Thor faced off against the Hulk, the two most powerful Marvel characters, but always a little bit on the skimpy side. And this is the two of them just going at it for half of one issue. It's drawn by Sal Buscema, and the narrative says, "Coming in low over Mayor Bradley's baby," little hint of old-time politics, at this very moment is Asgard's most powerful god, the mighty Thor. Would you agree that in the realm of comics, these two beings are the best there are, the only true titans? Then let the clash begin. And that's what happens. They just fight for half of one issue. And then they realize, this is the issue where they realize that their true enemy is Dormammu. And then we get the teams teaming up. Look at that. Look at that. That's the whole of them together, vowing to fight Dormammu. That's amazing. That's Bob Brown artwork. Again, another artist I don't think was really cut out for team books. That was terrific. Just so much fun. But the thing that makes this particular epic collection so epic is that you don't then get 15 issues of junk. Because what follows after here is the Avengers and the Avengers going home to Avengers Mansion and facing Thanos in a great run. And not only that, but you also get something that Englehart decided to do, which was to really enhance a love quadrangle. Very strange. The Swordsman and Mantis are a couple. When the Swordsman rejoins the Avengers, he has a girlfriend. He has a Korean girl, a Vietnamese girlfriend named Mantis, and they're a couple. And at the time, at the Avengers, the Scarlet Witch and the Vision are a couple as well. But Mantis becomes disillusioned with Swordsman. He's a bit of a loser. Englehart portrays him intentionally as a bit of a loser. Valiant enough as a team member, but prone to failure. At one point, he is simply bested by ordinary bad guys and tortured. He's constantly recovering from wounds. He's a loser. He's a sad sack. And Mantis starts to prefer the Vision to her man. And the Swordsman starts to know it. There's no way not to know it. And it's all done very well. Where he cries out, I hate Mantis, but I love her. I don't want women, I want my woman, I want that woman, while she is talking to Vision. It's all very adult. It was very well done. Where you wonder, how in the world is this going to play out? It added a kind of overtly sexual tension that had never been present in the Avengers before. For a while, there were a few issues where the Scarlet Witch was sort of coyishly infatuated with Steve Rogers, but nowhere near this level. And that, plus the Avengers storylines and a whole bunch of other great standalone issues, are all brought out here. They're all in the second part of this. There's not a weak issue anywhere in this. And it finishes off. Let me see if I can get to the very end. You see, this is what I mean. There's lots and lots of supporting material in the back. You get the Marvel's own mockeries of itself, but also text features from fanzines and whatnot. Very much worth your money. But at the very end of the issue, Michael K. Vaughan himself shows up. Kang the Conqueror shows up at the very end of this whole collection, and you know what's coming. What follows from that, but those issues are extremely good. What follows from that is the Celestial Madonna saga, because Kang has determined that a child born of a woman in the 20th century, to him, will rule the galaxy, and he can rule through the child. And he determines somehow that one of the Avengers women is the Celestial Madonna. And that's the storyline that comes next. But there's no feeling of anticlimax because the issues in here are so terrific. They're so amazingly done. They vary all over the map, but there are two main things here. Two main storylines in this epic collection. The first one is the Avengers Defenders War, which is pure plot. It's just pure bubblegum enjoyment. And then the second thing is the growing imbalance of that love quadrangle, played out in issues where the Avengers fight Claw, where they fight the Zodiac, where they fight Thanos. There are issues of Captain Marvel's comic that are drawn in here to support the Thanos arc, so you get great Jim Starlin artwork. Just an epic collection that I go to over and over again, as opposed to one that I look at and think, there's part of you that I don't like. That doesn't happen here. So there you go. That is my epic collection for World's Finest, for Comic Book Wednesday World's Finest with me and Michael K. Vaughan, where we talk about epic collections every Wednesday. Doesn't that sound like fun? I'm certainly hoping he thinks it sounds like fun. I will email him right away. Anyway, thank you, BookTube.